You are listening to The Only Constant, a podcast where we go beyond the usual discussions in technology and business and aim to explore more than explain. Join me for engaging discussions with a diverse range of global thought leaders as we seek to uncover new perspectives and insights in a free-flowing conversation. My guest today is Leon Gordon, and I am your host, Lasse Rindom. Welcome to another great episode of The Only Constant, this time with Leon Gordon, who I'm very happy to welcome to the show. Hi, Leon, and thank you for joining me today.
Hi, Lasse. Absolute pleasure to be here with you and looking forward to some interesting conversation today.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do, right? We're going to find some things that are a little bit more off topic, a little bit more explorative. That's how we usually do it. So, and I know you have so much experience in this field, both you're associated with Forbes and you're Microsoft MVP and everything. So, no, okay, I never do this with backgrounds, but now I did it anyway. So, I'm really looking forward to sort of, probe your mind a little bit on some of these things with generative AI.
Oh, absolutely. And what a prominent topic at the moment.
Exactly. So, Leon, data driven means rule based, right? Doesn't it? And how does this sentence rhyme with, unpredictable generative AI models?
Well, I think it's an interesting scenario first and foremost. So I ponder the question of does data driven mean rule based? And I think that there's a few ways that we can kind of chop this up for lack of a better term. So data driven, in my opinion, doesn't always have to be rule based. Yes, we have to be able to get data. So whether you're ingesting, streaming, there has to be a data source that you're bringing data in from. Obviously, you'd like to have some validation around that to say, yes, this data is actually correct and validated for what the purpose we're trying to achieve. And I guess the alternative of that is sometimes a data scientist would love this, is that we don't always need validated data as well. Sometimes we want data that's unstructured, messy, to be able to move forward. So I really think it depends on the context. But if we answer the question, first and foremost, how you've raised it, is does data driven have to be taken with a rule based approach? Generally, for large organizations, at least the ones that we work with at my company, Onyx Data, I would say yes. And I would say that the main reason behind this is for safeguarding, right? So when you're talking multi-million, billion-pound decisions being made on this data, then you want to ensure that it's factual. You want to ensure that you have the correct context. You want to ensure that it's validated. And you want to ensure that these rules are followed. Again, because these decisions can be game changing and change the future of the organization. As we work with startups, smaller organizations, I would say we have a little bit more of an element of being able to take some risks. Being able to see the art of the possible, where a rule-based approach isn't always the most advisable approach forward, because we can start to be innovative and play around with the data a bit more. So I know I've gone off on a couple of tangents there, but I really think context is key to that question.
Oh, I love it. But one of the things I first off, thought of when you started talking was, would you have said the same 2 years ago? Wouldn't it have been more like rule based? Yes, that's it, right? Because we are a little bit more stochastic with the new generative AI models, aren't we? We're accepting more unpredictability, at least.
If you ask me now, would I have said the same thing 2 years ago? I'd probably say yes. Would I have said the same thing maybe 5 or 7 years ago? That would definitely be up for debate. But I think that we can't just take data as data is. Okay. And I actually posted about this on LinkedIn yesterday, is that we have to have some form of human intuition, and kind of human, even empathy as well within how we're treating this data and utilizing it. And I don't think that we can just say, actually, this fictional employee called Karen, she is the worst performing person based on this data in an afternoon across our organization. Okay, well, let's add some human context to that data. Does Karen work in the afternoons for a start? How is our performance being measured? Does Karen have children that are coming home in the afternoons from school, and does she have an agreement with her department, etc.? And I think that that's probably why I would answer it the same 2 years ago, because we still need to have some flexibility in these rules. And those of you that are super technical may say, well, there are some rules there, Leon, for Karen, because maybe she has children, maybe she doesn't. But again, it depends how finite we're getting from a departmental level. From a departmental level, even, I would suggest that the context here is that one rule shouldn't apply across the board, and this is why we need to be a bit more innovative and explorative with the data if we're going to be data driven.
In one of the recent podcasts, I spoke to Yar Vadan who's been at Google. He just left Google a couple of months ago, and he said that, and it is something that rhymes a lot with my thinking. I've always said, let me just start with what I've always said, is that we've been working with structured, digital data for all the, forever in IT. As long as there's been IT, information technology is all about structured digital data to some extent, right? And now we suddenly can work with unstructured data. And he said that what caught Google by surprise. Yarev said that when generative AI came out, and the reason they didn't launch generative AI themselves was the concept generative AI. Like, people are sort of okay with it just generating something that had to be reviewed and evaluated. Usually, Google said, they were hunting precision, but have we given up on precision? Right? Have we given up on this? Just everyone was looking at the rules a couple of years ago. Now everyone's just looking at these stochastic AI models.
Again, I think it really depends on the use case. What I would suggest that we've seen with generative AI is probably not, there have been leaps forward in the technology, agreed. But what I suggest is that what we've actually seen is a leap forward in the interface. Now, it's very much wrapped in an interface that the layperson can interact with very easily. So this is whether it's a chat functionality or whether it's voice activated functionality. And I think that this is where we're starting to move away from what we would call precision. Okay,
Mm.
because we're now introducing people that are not from technical backgrounds to utilizing and leveraging this technology on a daily basis, and doing so en masse, okay,
Mm.
across the globe. And the age demographics, there's a very wide range here. So it's from children to pensioners and grandparents that are adopting this technology. So with that, I think that they don't have, or there's not an emphasis for them on accuracy or precision in the underlying data. They're not aware of it. They can't see it because of the new interface that's being brought in. With this, obviously, comes the commercial aspect of this technology as well. The top four organizations globally are investing billions into this technology. So I think with that being the case, we're moving more and more away from exposing the technicalities of this technology, which in turn probably doesn't expose the precision as much as we would like as well.
So you're saying they're not really, everyone's using it. The demographics are wild, as you said, right? But they're not really aware of the imprecision. But shouldn't they be?
Absolutely, this is a massive grey area with this technology, and again, for me, it's really been brought upon by that that mass effect of what's happened. Is we've seen that interface. So ChatGPT, in my opinion, which is obviously what has borne this technology for a lot of people. Those who are technical know that there's many different versions of generative pre-trained transformers out there, but
Mm.
ChatGPT is the one that hammered it home for everybody. Now, again, the reason they hammered it home is because of the interface they presented. There's no two ways around it. It's very easy to use. It's very easy to get the answers you want from. And
Or
this course,
get some answer at least.
absolutely, to get something from the prompt that you query the interface with, you'll get a result returned. Is probably the best way to quantify that. And for the vast majority of mass adopters, they're quite comfortable with that. Like I say, coupled with the actual commercial revenue being pumped into this technology as well, whether it's down to the hardware, the R&D, or actually in surfacing it to end users in already common programs like Windows, etc. I think that we're only going to see this continue to go one way. And there are masses of research being done in terms of identifying what happens in the neural networks
Mm.
underneath the hood, and obviously being able to understand hallucinations in a bit more detail. But I think that for the majority of the audience who are non-technical, who are adopting this technology, there's a massive learning curve to be taken on board here, and it's a big grey area that I haven't seen anybody with come with a solution to how we're going to overcome this in at least a short term.
No, because there's also this you just mentioned, different models also always, coming out and multiple different vendors of this, and each model, and also trying to understand what goes on behind the hood, right? Which is which seems very difficult, if even possible, to actually understand how it does it, because it works in a stochastic way, and just giving a different answer all the time. That's also some Yarov said that's a big problem, that you always get different answers. You with coding, you always know the outcome, but here you don't know the outcome. That's a completely deviation from how we usually code, right? But that also makes me think about with different models that people would be expecting that you ask an AI and they will just say AI is the same, but suddenly we have to, and you know that, I know that every AI model, every model like these, they respond differently to each query you give them, so they're not even alike. They are, and you don't know how they are not alike, right? They're
Abs-
unalike. you know?
Absolutely. My question would be here is, do we envisage this is the final form of AI? So I think that the goal, and I don't think that generative AI and LLMs are going to achieve this goal personally, but the goal of these organizations that are commercializing and then putting a lot of resource and capital behind this technology is to go for AGI. Okay.
Mm.
Now,
What is
with
that,
that,
Leon?
artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, I know what this abbreviation stands for. But what is it?
No one knows. So this is. So you will never get the same definition of this, and it's ever changing, right? So we had the same with the Turing test. Once the
But
Turing
it's just
test
this
was.
unfalsifiable claims, right? We're going to get AGI someday, right? The models are going to get better and better. Dr. Jeffrey Funk, if you know him, he attacked that very vehemently on my podcast, saying, technology tends to plateau very quickly. He said, right? It looks like something's coming out, exploding, everyone's doing it, and then it plateaus. And honestly, we've had, it's been more than a year now, hasn't it, since we got GPT-4, and we're still just working on GPT-4 size models. Everyone's saying GPT-5 will fix. You've seen these posts as well, and I'm not saying maybe we'll have a GPT-5 that'll fix the whole world, but it's just not there yet. It's just, it's dreams.
And I think that this is where a lot of technology comes from. Is from dreams. Dreams drive
Mm,
innovation, and I for one am happy for that to be the case. Now, what we see with core foundational technologies is, yes, they do plateau, but when they become embedded
yeah.
with other technologies, they then can go on and increase again. And to a certain extent, we're starting to see that with LLMs, and this is coming from robotics as well. So
Mm,
we're starting to see LLMs, or at least the vision being
yeah.
that they will become embedded in robotics. Now, we have a lot of questions to answer from this perspective. One of the main ones being power. How do we power the models, and how do we power summer forecasting? I believe I saw a post not too long ago suggesting that we'll have 1 billion robots to be able to support us in the future. Now, how do you power 1 billion robots? Is the first question. We struggle in the UK to power electric vehicles
Yes.
across the grid.
Yes.
So the common sense question would be, how are we going to power
Oh, but that's the way
with
you're
this?
asking those questions. I love, right? These friction questions, just getting closer to them, because the market is very hyped up about things that doesn't really touch realities. We're gonna have this in the future. We're gonna have AGI. All these have tons of robots. Okay, but we don't have a power grid that works, right? Oh, then that's a drag to the hype. Messaging that just keeps them going at full speed, light speed through empty vacuum space, right? So
But I don't think it is. I don't think it is a drag at all. I think what it does is it sparks other innovations. Okay,
yeah.
so we've seen this with LLMs. You mentioned previously we've had GPT-4 for over a year. We haven't seen any larger models being established as of yet, but we've seen more performant, smaller models
Yeah.
being established, and this
Suboptimizing all the time the technology.
exactly, and again, so what we're understanding here from a power perspective is, yes, we don't have the infrastructure based on the technology today and the power requirements today to be able to get to where we're going to. So what do we look at? Where can we optimize? Where can we become more performant? Where can we get more resources to drive this type of technology? We know there's a space race happening still, and we know that SpaceX have done a lot in terms of making the journey to space more affordable and more reliable. And there's been a huge innovation in that technology space as well. So I like to look at it on the fact of not dragging back, but okay, this is what we need where we are today. How do we get to that? And really ticking those boxes or crossing off those options as quickly as possible.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so I think I get your stance here because I'm always, I'm looking at a little bit at you here as well and being a little bit so because you make some claims, you said the AGI, you say these claims that I always say is like unfalsifiable and just making a lot of stress in people. Like they feel like they're behind or they're not aware of these things coming out. While I'm just saying, I'm not really seeing these things yet. They might be there someday, right? Well, let's try at least now 1.5 year into massive hype. Let's try to work with what we have right now and assume that this is what we've got. Let's work with that right now, and then
Okay.
let's review it again in 2 years. Or to get my point here.
Yeah, I do. And like I say, I think that so you're always going to get early adopters, innovators. You're always going to
Mm,
get those that are at the other scale, which are on legacy technologies. And why we've seen the hype circle, if we want to call it that, around this technology at the moment is because it's a technical advancement that's been adopted by the layperson and the
yeah,
person outside of this space. And this is what's driving all. I think so. Amazon had this with their walk-in shop, where
yeah,
actually became apparent that they were using a small development team to ensure that it was actually that their solution was viable and it wasn't AI. And this is being driven by everybody trying to be first.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah. And then you have
and
people dreaming sci-fi dreams, lay people dreaming that as well, right?
exactly, and it's something that we probably haven't seen. At
Mm.
least I can't think of an example off the top of my mind where we've seen this type of technology adopted en masse and invested in en masse to this extent.
No, I spoke to, it's not at the time of recording, it's not published yet. I spoke to Thomas Hildebrand, who's a full professor of computer science in Copenhagen, about if this is, the largest hype we've ever seen. And he said, yes, he believes it is. We've never seen anything mass dispersed this quickly. Just everyone's touched it. Everyone knows it. Even granddads and grandmoms knows the word Chat GPT, which is the weirdest, terrible word in the world, right? But yeah, but that is right. That's probably where all these sci-fi dreams are coming from. I just try to, for enterprise in my discussions, to make it real and get into something where it touches with the technology we currently have, touches upon some of the problems and the friction they have in their company, so making it real in some extent, instead of just having these sci-fi dreams that are very nice for conferences but very difficult when you get back into the office and you have to type in invoices, right?
Yeah, I agree. I do agree with that to a certain extent. And but again, being the optimist, I'd like to look, and being a
Mm.
technologist as well.
Yes.
Fundamentally, I like to look at this. Is that this is the beginning of the future. That as a young person, technology driven, interested in sci-fi, this is what we wanted. Right? Is we
Mm.
wanted the masses to be adopting technology. We
Yeah.
wanted to move into what potentially could become a new
True.
age, and so yeah, I think that with this we do have to come out that we haven't touched on the plethora of risks associated with this yet, from
No.
biases to ethics to power, like we said, sustainability. The list is endless. It absolutely is. But what happens is when you go into these I will call it the dawn of a new age, or at least it should be, is the way to put it, is that we should start to see people of all backgrounds, people of all ages adopting this technology now and being able to move forward with it. We spoke on some of the grey areas earlier in terms of
Yeah.
understanding, etc. Yes, we need training. That's another issue
Yeah.
to overcome. But I really think that we are going into. I'm not going to call it a nano age or suggest anything that's superlative for no reason. But I think that times have changed. We saw it with COVID. We saw a massive change in
Yeah.
infrastructure to enable this type of technology that we're now using. Organizations got a lot more comfortable with not having access to their people internally day in, day out. And this really put the foundations in place, I feel, for
Mm.
for, the, for this adoption. Now, I think that the use case for me for this technology at the moment is a virtual assistant or a co-pilot that needs to be monitored, and needs to be proof checked, but can increase your productivity 10x,
Yeah.
100x, depending on the role you're in. And that's really where I see that this technology can be adopted today, across organizations.
Well, I agree, right? This assistant thing, I don't go for the autonomous things. At least, I think that's a difficult, whole other ball game. I think that's also where we've seen all the POCs gone wrong in the last couple of years. Is where people just put it in autonomous to do some things and not really cared about some of the issues that we you touched upon, and I've talked about also on other episodes. So I agree with that. Copilot annoys me a little bit that sort of Microsoft sort of owns that word now. And not that I don't like Microsoft. It's just annoying that someone owns that word because it's a good word for it, right? So it feels like you're constantly talking about Microsoft when you're saying you're co-piloting it, right? But I also think I think some of the things that you're the way you're responding the last question here I asked you, it just tells me what I've also seen with in other discussions also on LinkedIn and with people I meet, is there are these two different camps. It's almost like you're either you love Taylor Swift or you hate Taylor Swift, right? And you're so afraid that if you love Taylor Swift that you'll say anything. Oh, I didn't like that song. Then you're afraid that people say, "Oh, are you a hater?" It's like either or, right? So just having you say, "Oh, I'm a technologist, I believe," and you go full crazy sci-fi hype, and then you say, "But there are some issues," and it's almost you feel like I have to be careful not to say these things, right? Do you get my point?
Yeah, I agree, and I think that that's a fundamental human trait, right? Is that, and so the way that I like to give this analogy in the UK, for all those listeners, I'm based in the UK, so I use UK football teams to suggest this.
Oh, I don't even know what you're a fan of, but so be careful here.
Well, what I would suggest is that you have Manchester City and Manchester United. Okay, two clubs that exist in the same city in the UK, and the fans will hate each other. They'll boo the players just to get somebody to win. Okay, now when England play and those two sets of players come together and both appear for England, the fans will go ahead and cheer them. And so
Yeah.
you have this tribism. So you're always gonna get in humanity people wanting to be a part of a community and subscribe to it. So you're always going to have this versus that. I don't think we're ever going to escape from that, and you have to associate that with AI where we
Yeah, so
are as
we
well.
need to find the love for football here. That's my thing. Then we need to find out what is it behind the AI yes sayers and naysayers. Those two camps. What are they? What is their common concern, right? And that is efficiency, productivity, responsibility, ethical. I think there's a lot of things here that people actually care about in both camps, and that might be the football that we need to play in the end.
Yeah, I agree, and I suppose my main concern here is not the technology. It's probably how far behind we are in legislating, understanding, conceptualizing the technology. And I
Mm,
think that many listeners might not want to hear me say this, but I think the horse has bolted, so to speak. I think that we're too far behind to answer a lot of these questions now in terms of how do we deal with the ethics, the biases, the security.
mm,
Let's not get into deep fakes and massive amounts
no,
of money being transferred, etc., and what's capable. I know we're suggesting we're only on GPT-4 at the moment. Would the world be ready for
55.
an advancement of a GPT-5? And this is why I question it. I think one of the reasons, if I'm not mistaken, that OpenAI actually released this technology, because Google were a lot further down the road, after they released their initial paper, was to make this available to the masses so that we could become aware of this technology and any ramifications that come with it. So yeah, I would suggest that we're probably not in a position, at least in my mind, maybe as technologists we are, but globally not in a position to adopt a GPT-5 yet.
No, the combination of social media, that it can proliferate messages unmediated, right? Because it's basically just an algorithm mediating, and then generative AI, technology and capabilities is actually rather frightening, right? To some extent, I think. I also said, I hope that in some ways this will turn a lot of people away from social media, which I think is one of the worst things in the world to some extent. Although we know each other from also social media, LinkedIn, but get people to turn a little bit away from it because they want something that's mediated again. That's where you have media, right? Someone saying we trust this. This is something you can trust, right?
Well, this is the concern. So if we go back to, I believe it's the Cambridge Analytica the scandal, if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken, and everything that happened underlying and supporting what happened there across multiple countries and multiple voting systems and parliamentary systems. Now imagine what's possible with generative AI on top of that.
yeah,
It's we start to, and again, this is why I don't like getting too far into fear mongering, etc. But if we simply had some constraints like watermarking every
yeah.
AI generated piece of content, that would come some way into overcoming a lot of the issues that we're already facing, right? Because like we've mentioned, whilst we have GPT-4, which is closed source, we have a lot more open source technologies that are available that might not be able to achieve the video generation that we see from the likes of Sora, etc. But we're not far off it with what's open source. So for those that are such inclined and that way minded, it could very much be used for malicious purposes, and the box is already open.
Yeah, I mean, they will also do it. That's what Martin Peterson said on number 10. He's a CISO at global facility management company ISS. He said, I have regulations in what I can do as a CISO, but the bad actors they don't follow regulation. That's part of the whole idea. He said, right? So they will just use models, even though you have to watermark it. They won't do that.
Exactly, and this is why I go back to my initial point: is that I think that unfortunately we're probably a bit too far ahead of the curve at the moment, and
Hmm.
legislation and security, etc., are currently playing
Yeah,
catch
and
up.
we trust what we see, right? Humans trust it. And I went to a reception for my old professor who actually became tenured as a professor, full professor. He became a full professor on Friday. I'm trying to find the right words in English here for this. And there I met another old professor I had at when I studied, and he said, the problem is that we have to review things and be skeptical. That's like 100 to 1,000 fold increase in our the attention and the energy we need when we approach the world, compared to when we just say, okay, we trust what we meet. So teaching people to just review things and be skeptical is not necessarily viable because it takes so much human energy and effort.
Agreed. I really firmly agree with that. Unfortunately, I believe we're coming into a world where we don't have a choice.
No, no.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so let's stop with the fear mongering. Thank you for that, Leon. Love that. But let's, power out of the box. I think that's an interesting thing also to discuss a little bit here with someone like you. So, will enterprises eventually need to build their own proprietary AI models, you think, just like we did 5 years ago or even 3 years ago? Or will these foundational models that we now have in the cloud for anything, vision, face recognition, chat, whatever you want, right? Will they sort of, these models deployed by the hyperscales, will they fix most of the problems in the world? I actually thought about, asking you for percentage here, but that's difficult. But it's just, giving people an idea of where they should focus, right?
Yeah, I think for me, and at least our customer base, is I would suggest focusing on niched models, even if they are based initially on foundational models. The reason being is that you don't, at least for a lot of opportunities that we see for enterprise organizations and small medium businesses, is that you really want a niched specialist to be able to achieve the goals, whether it's
Mm.
proof of concept or productionizing a solution, as opposed to having a foundational model which is general purpose. From that perspective, so that may become your starting point, and then really fine tuning and specializing that model for certain scenarios and certain use cases would be my suggested route forward for enterprise and production level solutions. Now, outside
Also,
of
in
that,
something like vision, also when you do vision, you also build your own vision engine.
well, I mean, we wouldn't generally. So we would leverage existing technologies. Again, I don't know how much of a Microsoft fan you are or not, but again, we would leverage
I am a
Azure.
Microsoft fan. Don't worry. That is so.
we would leverage Azure as a starting point for this, and then build on top of that.
Mm, yeah, exactly. So whenever I show enterprise executives, I just actually go in and show them the AI services, right? The picture there on the screen, and they're like, okay, so many capabilities out of the box. Big, I call them all foundational big models, right? Because they're very well trained. They're not catered to your specific images, but they're not trained on all kinds of images. And people are like, whoa, can we get this out of the box? Yes, you can.
Yes.
So people just don't know this yet, and that's why I'm asking: do people still need to build their own, niche stuff and spend millions and don't know if they're going to get anything, or should they start off with these foundational models and see how can we even look at this with these models?
Absolutely. For me, out of the box would be definitely the route to go. But I still have a warm spot in my heart for open source as well. I think
Mm.
that what we're seeing in that space, and especially Meta joining the ring, so to speak, and really laying down their hat in that ring as well, is only going to be good for that space for organizations looking to leverage that technology. Again, for the bad actors, there's some work to be done.
I also see that with so some rack solutions, and people get it to work with AI search, which is a really nice functionality from in Microsoft Vector database. But then they end up putting it in production with an open source model instead because that's cheaper, right? So in the end, down the line.
Agreed, and like a lot of people, like you mentioned, use GPT-4 as their baseline. For something that GPT-3, for example, might be able to accommodate, or Mistral. Again, so my suggestion would be start with out of the box, but partner with organizations that hold the expertise to ensure you're delivering the right solution, and you're not using, I don't know, a hammer when you need a screwdriver, for example.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. But so what is the role of data engineers and data scientists then in the world of generative AI and these large foundational AI models in the cloud?
I believe for me that their role becomes even more important, especially. So let's focus on the data engineer first. It's never been so important to ensure that your data estate is correctly managed, governed, validated, accurate, and timely. I guess
Mm.
is the way to put that, and to kind of summarize that. So I think the data engineer, as we've seen previously, definitely the unsung hero. We were speaking with a client just the other day, and they apologized to one of my senior consultants because they thanked them for all of the work they're doing, but went on to say that what the main stakeholders are interested is the actual data, the dashboards, visualizations, and the predictions that come off the back of it. So I think you have to be comfortable knowing it's a thankless task, but it is absolutely for me the one of the most important as well. For an analyst and a scientist, again, they need to look at this like they now have a superpower. Let's go back to Copilot, virtual assistant next to them, and really use it to leverage and understand how they can become more efficient,
Mm.
do things at scale, and really get to answers quickly, based on utilizing this type of technology.
So you're saying, data engineers are like one of my friends once said that the IT people are gilded janitors to some extent, getting very well paid to fix some basic stuff no one really sees. So that's the engineer thing, still, right?
Yeah, I think you could summarize it like that. I don't think my engineering background or some of my engineering colleagues will be too happy with that. But I mean, I would kind of paint them
But
as
pipelines sound a little bit like a plumber, doesn't it?
it does, and that's exactly what you need to be looking at is how do you transfer data around your estate, and again, like I say, making sure that it's governed, timely, accurate, validated. We spoke about this at the beginning of today's session, speaking about the accuracy
Mm.
of data that's required for to become data driven. And how can you even say that you're data driven if you don't have these fundamental pieces in line?
Yeah, you can't really. I wrote, I think, 1.5 years ago almost, or quickly after ChatGPT released. Just don't start dreaming about AI if you don't trust your dashboard, right? That was, I think that there's something there, right? And a lot of people are still, we have this idea, and oh, can we do this with AI? I'm like, yeah, you can do this with, an alert on your BI dashboard. Do you have a BI dashboard? No, we use paginated reports and we send them around. Oh, come on, just please.
Yeah, I agree. But what we are seeing, and I think this is one of the key parts in this whole revolution that we've seen initially with data, then as you mentioned with traditional AI, and now into the generative AI, is that the world is becoming more data literate, which I
Mm.
think it can only ever be a good thing. Yes, we still have some way to go, but again, if we compare this with 2 years ago, 5 years ago, we're in a much better position now.
Yeah, but I see that also when I speak to CFOs. We speak a lot to CFOs because we work a lot with CFO service and in business support in Basico, and so many of these have quite a high literacy when it comes to talking about data problems and data pipeline issues. I'm really impressed with it. So I can actually pose some really difficult questions and difficult concepts to them. They're like, they get it, they grasp it. Sometimes it's senior people at my own company that has trouble understanding these tech words, right? But the customers are really, a CFO has to, they own the data in the company and they have to understand how to work with it, right, all the time. That's just
Absolutely.
the way that it is. It's not just about numbers in an Excel spreadsheet now. It's about BI dashboards, about data flows and pipelines, and it's about all those things, integrating systems, right?
Agreed, and this is becoming apparent across departments as well. You're now looking at marketing teams that are leveraging sales teams. They want to know, salespeople want to know their
Mm,
data. They want to know their numbers. They
yeah.
want to know how to go into their next call. What's the most likely product to sell? Like I say, across department, we're seeing higher data literacy, which is amazing.
And that's actually a cool thing. The marketing ecosystem is really, really enmeshed and really, really, really tight knit to some extent between Google and Google Analytics and your Meta and your email marketing platform and your CRMs. It just works in a perfect ecosystem almost. I've been working with it a couple of years ago, and I was really impressed by it. I was like, whoa, does this exist like this? When then you go back to ERPs and you're like, how is this world so disconnected? What's going on, man? Come on, just
Agreed, and I think that what probably has happened there, at least in my experience, is that when you remove some of the guardrails of IT, and again, that can be up for debate whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you
mm,
look at your marketing teams that want to innovate very quickly, and suddenly, like you said, they have something that's very cohesive. I'm not too sure it started like that, but they then become the owners of their data. They
probably
then become
because
the
Google and
owners.
Facebook own everything, right? That's probably why it works together. That's
Well, data-driven organizations. If you look at the leading organizations across industry, to point a few, so let's look at Meta, Google, Amazon, Netflix, for example. They all utilize, leverage, and harness data.
mm.
And would be in my mind the epitome of data-driven organizations.
But they also own. You could say they own the infrastructure of the digital world, right? You don't have anyone in financial services that do the same thing. So if you're a business, you have to have a Google account and have Google Ads, and you have to be on Facebook, Meta, something. There's a thing. It's sort of an infrastructure of the world, right? Google and
Yeah,
Meta.
yeah, I'd agree definitely
They
with Google
define
and
the
Meta.
standards, right? This is define the standards. That's why it's easier maybe to make an ecosystem than, for instance, with SAP and I don't know, right?
Yeah, but I think Netflix would probably be the exception to the rule there, because they were innovative in how they created their own ecosystem and
Mm,
then leveraged data throughout that. Airbnb is probably another great example,
mm.
from that perspective as well. How they really transformed, disrupted an industry, and then leveraged data to then continue to drive it forward as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So Leon, if you had a magic wand, this is the perfect consultant questions, right? You have a magic wand, what would you change tomorrow? But if you had one, what would you add to the AI market right now? For the buyers, for the technology, your Microsoft MVP, what should Microsoft add? And also for investors, I think those three are interesting. Buyers, how would you transform them with a Harry Potter spell tomorrow?
It's very, how many wishes do I get? I guess is the question here. Where would I like to focus? So I guess, where my mind is today is probably going to be on where we are. Let's stick to the present, where we are today, and this is firmly in adoption. What's going to be the magic bullet to ensure that we have seamless adoption, of for those people that want to innovate at the bleeding edge of technology, to overcome some of the grey areas that we currently have, whether it's training, security, bias, ethics, etc. So, what's really going to be the magic bullet to that? And I don't have the answer, unfortunately.
Mm. No, no, but it could be something everyone has had a course on challenges, or everyone's learned to be skeptical when they're on social media. It could be something like that, couldn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So to answer those questions in a single question would be what I would use that magic wand for, I think.
but also, I think on bias, right? What is the issue? What annoys you the most when you meet buyers today?
So, do you mean bias within the actual models?
Some people, customers, enterprise
Oh,
customers who
okay.
wants to come and buy, AI solutions. So some of the preconceptions, the misconceptions they might have, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess again, it's probably that grey area. So we had one project with a financial client of ours, and this was just when ChatGPT had been released, and we were working on Power BI solutions for them at the time. And the question posed to us was, can we have our financial data in ChatGPT? Now, my mind exploded with how loaded that question was, and how to actually combat. Exactly, and I think that again, this comes back to that interface and wanting to adopt this technology, but not having your foundational layers in place. We would so when we actually arrived on that project, they were using Excel spreadsheets as a data source as well. For their current financial reporting, so you can see how organizations are wanting to leap from being fairly immature in their data
Mm.
driven solutions to them being bleeding edge. And I think that's probably where the biggest conundrum is at the
Yeah, they
moment.
think the Gen AI solution technology is a magic wand, actually.
Absolutely,
Mhm.
absolutely.
So you'd want, more mature buyers. You want buyers who maybe have a modernized data infrastructure.
Well, no, I think I would want to, and this is part of our job, right? Is to let our customers understand the journey they have to go on, but also delivering value as part of that as well. So that's probably where I would look at it from is being more receptive to where they are on that journey,
Mm.
and the steps required to get to
More
newer
realistic.
technologies. Yeah.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So on technology, so now you just touched upon it, the magic wand for technology, for the technology providers and the models, maybe having them better working with tabular numeric data, that could be a thing.
Well, I mean, so again, I think we need to have specialized models for this. And you know this already. Fundamentally, you're not going to get numeric accuracy based on the way that the models are actually
I had it
built.
give me, even with the Python code interpreter, I have it give me, the last 10 digits of pi the other day. Love that.
But the technology, this, and again, this comes down to the understanding. Anybody that technically understands where we are, this technology will be fully aware that for
Mm,
numeracy, mathematics, etc., we still have plenty of work to do. But again, why would you use a hammer for screwing in
true.
a screw? So again, it's about that understanding of, yes, this is what I'm looking to achieve. This is my use case. The tooling comes secondary to actually achieving what the goal is.
So what would you be your magic wand for the technology? What would you want if you could get something tomorrow? Microsoft released it tomorrow in Microsoft Cloud, not in Google Cloud. Microsoft released it in Google Cloud. That would be fun. Anyway.
Well, I guess we probably, to a certain extent, already have it, at least in its first form, and this is the Copilot or a Chat GPT. So, and I feel
A
Bill
copilot that could
Gates.
actually make good PowerPoints. Oh, that's a good one.
The joys of presentation decks.
Yeah.
So I guess for me, probably the next step will be the robotic aspect, and having an LLM that can perform actions, and understand its environment around me, and be used as an assistant from that perspective.
Mm,
I think that not just for me, but for people that potentially have physical disabilities, so a lot of the menial tasks that people do as jobs, etc. A lot of that
yeah.
could become eradicated with that type of technology.
Yeah. And investors. I think Yari Vadan said that the problem is a lot of investments are going into different models and also startups that are building on the generative AI technology. And he said that you have to understand that the baseline has moved, right? And generative AI technology and the LLMs are just a commodity today. So you should not invest in that. You should invest in something differently. The good idea. More than just the technology. Do you? What would you want to do with investors? Right? Do you think they're investing their money correctly right now?
I'm not an investor, so it's very difficult for me to to,
Well,
to say
the tech
anything.
investors, the tech money that is flowing. Do you think they're flowing the right places?
Um, Yeah. So I think Satya Nadella, obviously CEO of Microsoft, I think that he hit the nail on the head when he suggested that Microsoft have all areas covered above and below OpenAI. So they've invested in the infrastructure,
Mm,
they've
mm,
invested in the compute, the resource, and obviously the technology itself. So there's not really any way for AI to expand without some form of Microsoft involvement.
no.
Nvidia obviously had hit the $1 trillion market cap. So my suggestion with all of these type of technologies is that look below the surface. So what's the technology actually achieving, and then how is that technology being held together? So in this instance, we know that it's down to infrastructure, compute, and obviously the resources that exist underneath it. So that would be where I would be investing my money, and I'm sure a lot of investors are. I wouldn't be investing in an AI driven startup organization
Mm,
currently at the moment, because it's like the gold rush or the dot-com rush. We don't know what's around the corner. We don't know what's
yeah.
around the corner from compliance. We don't know what's around the corner from security legislation, and we don't know what's around the corner with any of these models either, and the next leap forward in technology, which inevitably there will be.
Yeah, that's like what you said with, we are immature from from all the risks associated with this, but we're also a little bit immature in knowing, we the Copilot is sort of a generic capability that everyone just had. You can just ask it, blah blah blah, right? You can work with it, but it's generic. It's a productivity tool that's not non-specific, and everyone investing in the technology and the models as well is just engineering answers. I say I've said this multiple times on the podcast that there is sort of a strategic deficit that is being answered by engineers right now. What can we do? Or maybe what can we invest in instead of saying what do we want? We still need to see this. Here is this application that's driven by generative AI that you cannot live without, and that's maybe we're not going to have that. Maybe we're going to have it just everywhere and almost unnoticed. But we still need to see, this is the tool you should have invested in, right? Nvidia is like chips. Okay, cool. You invested in bricks, but what about investing in the buildings and the architects, and how does the city look? Where should you buy your real estate? I don't care about the brick producer. I want to know where to build my house, right? Where's the next big city gonna be? Do you get my point?
Yeah, I do indeed, and for some people, they thrive off this as investors, and you can
Mm,
go ahead and select the right investment based on that. For me personally, like I say, there's too much risk involved in predicting what's
yeah.
going to come next. So I would stick to, like you've mentioned, the resources, the compute, and the chips.
There's just
Uh,
not a lot of, there's just not a lot of. Usually, you have something that looks a little bit like it. And that's maybe the most profound evidence that we are in a completely new cycle because we don't know where we're going. We don't know. It doesn't. It's not like there's something you say. Oh, there are some trends here. The trends are just tech, and then we'll see, right? To some extent.
Well, I guess that the way that I look at this at the moment is we've probably never been in a position in history where we can generate um, elements that look realistic to
No,
us. Now, whether it's by voice, whether it's by sight,
no,
or whether it's by text, I don't believe that we've been in a scenario like this, or at least to my knowledge, across history. Now, it's we're looking at this as like the art of the possible. What comes after this? Well, we don't know. We've never been here
no,
previously. We don't have anything. We don't have an inflection point to look back at and say, well, generally, based on historic, let's go to machine learning to
no.
predict what's going to come next. We don't have this. I
No,
think.
people always do it with cars, right, and everything, but it's not the same. It's just not the same.
Yeah, I think that it really depends where technology goes next. So at the moment, with GPTs, obviously they have to be trained on historic data. So we're never going to come out of that, at
No,
least in the present. So that for me would be a really big leap forward to say, well, actually, and then again, it's probably a step towards AGI, depending on how you define that. But at that moment, in my mind, we probably will realize that based on the amount of commercial investment that's happening in this space currently, then we open up a world of, okay, nobody ever knows what's really possible, because now we're able to train these models on what's around them in real time, and what potentially they can imagine, which becomes a lot more closer to what humans can currently do.
yeah, but it's. I think it was Kurt Kegel. I said this that it's like a hack on language, the language models, and language is the original human organization to some extent. That's the baseline of all our organization is that we can speak to each other and sort of agree. You do this, I do this, and this means that there's something completely novel going around on here. We don't know what's actually coming out of this in the end, because it's touching upon something so basic in us, and also something changing it so radically. um yeah, that's a very
Exactly, and
poetic way, maybe.
this is why there's so much excitement around it at the moment, and so much reservation
Yeah, yeah, both of them,
as
both
well.
camps, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And I think Bill Gates, I saw an interview where he mentioned that him and other industry leaders in the space saw OpenAI solution ChatGPT for the first time. And the way that I like the way that Bill Gates put it is that he discusses this as a new way to interface with computers. So he doesn't touch on the fact of generating content
No,
or any other aspect. He
he sees it as
firmly
a coding
suggests this
language.
is
Yeah, he sees it as a code. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that the possibilities that opens up is going to be very interesting as well.
Also says a lot about Bill Gates, maybe.
Well, where would you expect his mind to go straight to? As but no, I think that that's a really interesting concept that probably hasn't been explored as much since ChatGPT became available.
No, I think a lot of developers are seeing this is this way, right? But a lot of people are obviously, and that's also why so many companies were like, "Oh, this is a chatbot. What does it replace? Customer service." That's the imagination people had, right? And they were like, "No, let's not give it to our customers initially. Let's find." So people are grasping to figure out where it fits the best. And I think this whole IT focus, is moving with unstructured data, analyzing that, getting insights from things you don't have insights from normally. I think that's where we're going to see a lot of adoption, and also in coding, and in interpreting APIs to one another, endpoints to endpoint. I think there's some things here, right? Using it exactly for an interface, but the problem is when he says that, it also he sort of also says that what I said before, hack on language, right? Is that humans become a human endpoint, right? To some extent, there is something here. It's a new way of communicating with machines, and humans sort of become a machine, and that you know.
I don't know the answer to that. I
No.
think that the rabbit R one's probably a good example of how potentially it can be used as interface in the future. A lot of people would speak about the human evolution and what
Mm.
that looks like. So I would probably again probably like to stick a bit closer to the present without speculating too much.
So now I got
Um,
it. Became a sci-fi guy. Sorry about that. No, that's what
no,
happens.
no, it's okay because there's a lot of reservation around these type of topics and
Mm.
so there should be,
Yeah.
but I firmly believe that AI won't just be used for IT applications. It will become more and more embedded in day to day solutions and in the way that in the way that we navigate around. Like we mentioned, the Rabbit R1, which becomes a handheld
Mm.
interface to perform actions. I firmly believe that we probably won't be too far away from not having many not AI driven tools available to us in day to day life.
Yeah, yeah. Washing machines and drummers and everything, right? Everywhere.
Well, we already have it, right? For those, I mean, my washing machine doesn't send any data, neither does my tumble dryer. But I know there's some on the market that do, and fridges too.
I'm just waiting for them to, talk about football, to have something where when I'm annoyed at someone not hitting the goal, right? I can just shout to an app, and then he'll reply with his voice, right? Sorry, Trossard saying, "Sorry, I missed that chance," right? Or
Well,
Martinelli. I'm an Arsenal fan, by the way, but
well, you can just you could just be able to generate the actual goal you wanted to see.
yeah, yeah. Oh, football just became extremely boring. Yeah. We won again. Hey. No, but there's a, Leon, I also want to, there's a tendency for everyone to feel left behind in the market right now. Almost all companies feel they are lacking. I just want to ask you, are they really lacking in your opinion?
No, I would say no. I'm very fortunate as I've spoken all over the world and I've been able to ask the question regarding AI adoption. Some areas there's mass AI adoption. In other areas there's little to none
Mm.
across the globe. And so you're always going to have, like I mentioned before, innovative bleeding edge
Yeah.
technology organizations, and you're always going to have those companies that live just above legacy. And for those of you that I'm going to show my age now, for those of you that are Microsoft developers, I always mention now, so you can firmly be an Azure data engineer, you can be Azure AI Studio, but if you still wanted to have a job working with SSIS, so SQL Server Integration Services, or T-SQL in SQL Server Management Studio, you will still be able to find one
Mm.
quite easily. So you're always going to have this range of where organizations actually are for a large number of reasons. And my suggestion is always start with proof of concepts that either solve a business goal or have a view to deliver value.
Yeah.
Quantify the risks associated with that project. Involve key stakeholders, and then decide whether it's the right solution for you. If you have in-house expertise, fantastic. If you don't, then partner with external expertise to really ensure that the project can be as successful as possible.
Yeah, but also, just looking at, something like retrieval augmented generation, right? It didn't exist a year ago. I think it was invented in the summer, wasn't it, or something around the summer last year. So no one's really that far ahead, right? You can't really be, or can you?
I guess you always have those that are that are very leading edge is probably the best way to
Yeah.
put it. So technology exists behind closed doors before it becomes public, whether it's in private preview or obviously being developed. So you will have a certain set of individuals that
Mm.
know more than others out there. Again, is this industry specific? Potentially not, but there will always be an organization or a partner available that is definitely more well versed than potentially the internal team or others outside of that.
Yeah.
And so that really gives you the best chance of moving forward. But yes, to answer the initial question, we are going to see a plethora of new jobs evolving, as has been the case throughout history, and with that we'll see older jobs potentially disappearing, which again has been the case throughout history.
And both of us, working in advisory roles, consultancy roles, of course, we'd say, there are partners out there who knows. Just, give us a call.
Absolutely, but my suggestion would be, why would you not?
Yeah.
And again, this whether you decide to partner with me or anybody
Yeah.
else,
Yeah.
with these type of technologies, it can be very time consuming, very costly to not get it right, and you could also there's also an opportunity cost at play here as well.
People need to also, extend their knowledge and their resources, and instead of hiring a full team, just tap into, and what I usually call an extended COE. That's makes sense to do that with the external resources completely, for companies to just know more, right, and know what the competition is doing and all that stuff, right. That's why you work with consultants in general, right. So it makes sense.
Absolutely,
So,
absolutely.
but I also think, with companies lagging behind, those that are lagging behind, aren't they the ones that that should have modernized their data infrastructure 5 years ago and their ERP 15 years ago?
Absolutely, but we are where we are. I think
Mm.
that if that there's been plenty of technological advancements in the last 10 to 15 years that like you mentioned, these companies potentially haven't adopted, and yes, some of them potentially are still industry leading. Does that mean it's going to be the case for the next 10 years? My suggestion would probably it's not. But again, so you have to look at this and say, okay, how can we go from where we are today to getting to where we need to be tomorrow, and what are the steps we need to do to achieve this, and where are our quick wins
But
in
hey,
terms of things to move
just touch
forward.
upon that. These companies heard before, that they're gonna be out of business if they don't modernize, right, their stack before. They've heard that tons of times, and they haven't done it. So, is this really the urgency real this time, Leon?
I think that's for every organization to quantify. Somebody, Blockbuster and Kodak would say yes, based on those historical aspects. And there's other organizations that have been able to ride the wind, so to speak, and not have
The
to upgrade and
Blockbuster and
invest.
Kodak, that's almost a bias today to some extent, right? That's those that failed, have survivor bias, but you also have, death bias or whatever, right? So this seems like the Kodak and Blockbuster is always being mentioned, why you should. But there's also a lot of
Absolutely.
companies who work with tons of legacy systems right now, and I tend to think that you can't keep on doing that now with the AI craze, right? I don't think you can do that in an AI world. Like, in 10 years, that's going to be a huge problem. And I really, really believe that this is different from, something like that .com. If you don't go to web, you're gonna die. I think there's something, inherently different here because everything's gonna data's gonna drive everything in the world. Have you read AI 2041 by Kai Fu Lee?
I haven't, no.
No, but he just talks about this, the data cloud, the private data cloud, public data cloud, all the things, like it's sort of a currency you're gonna be using in 20 years, right? Your data is gonna be a primary thing you're almost using to buy things with and interact with the world. I just think that the necessity is much bigger now than it was previously. So all these companies that died, obviously, that's a bad story. But there's also so many who survived, and I think it's just important to say you need to modernize your data stack. You need to modernize your core applications. You need to get on the beat with these things, right? You can't keep going with your old on-prem 15-year-old ERP system. Um,
Yeah, I would agree. I think that the way that I'd probably again suggest to approach this is what's the use case, what's the goal, and then
mm,
select your tool. There's a lot of organizations that will choose AI when really all they need is RPA, for example.
mm,
There's
mm.
let's ensure we're using the right tool for the right use case, but let's get on this train. I think that the further you leave it, especially with the leaps that we're seeing currently in technology, the further behind you'll be. And again, we can't cover off all use cases and all context here, but without not being able to generalize, I would suggest that there's no time more like now to start that journey.
Yeah, because if you don't modernize, you the problem is that modernization is not always a good business case, but there could just be so many opportunities in 3, 4, 5 years right now that you could be missing out on if you don't do it. And that is actually a real fear that I think companies should have today, don't you think?
Absolutely, and I alluded to this when we mentioned the opportunity cost here as well. It's something that you potentially can't quantify, but to be able to move forward and what I find at the moment. And especially across organizations like my own, which are very agile and very
Mm,
nimble, is that you want to put yourself in a position where if you would like to adopt and have proof of concepts and drive value on these technologies, it's not a massive leap to get to, whether that's from staff and
mm.
resource to obviously change and digital transformation in the organization. But the closer you are to not being a massive leap of 5 generations worth of tech, for example, uh, in my opinion, is where you want to be in this day and age, because there are going to be a lot of changes in the technical space coming ahead.
Yes, some foundational work companies need to do to get ready for that.
Agreed.
Cool. Leon, this has been a terrific conversation and a brilliant episode of The Only Constant. I'm so happy to have had you on. And I have one final question, which I always pose. It's like the centerpiece of the podcast. And I hope you're ready for that one.
I hope so.
So, Leon, what is the only constant?
That there is no constant. I firmly believe in the day and age that we existing at the moment, there's going to be a plethora of changes across every area of humanity. Now, this is going to affect those of us that are of a certain age and those of us that are below a certain age as well. But I firmly expect tomorrow not to be like today, and yesterday to be nothing like next year either. I think that a lot of us as technologists have heralded this moment, looking at sci-fi movies and reading sci-fi novels. But I think, and I talk about this with colleagues and friends all the time, is that I don't think we were actually ready for what that might be like. We now exist in a world where data is all ever present, being generated on every device that's around us. Some of that data obviously being very personal, other elements of it not, but being able to leverage, harvest that data, potentially monetize that data, and fundamentally build community, governments, civilizations on that data is both a thought provoking and scary future. I prefer to be the optimist and look at this as an opportunity for humanity to enter into another age. And I firmly believe that we have responsible enough hierarchies that will ensure that's going to be the right way forward.
So, the only constant is the mix of multiple changes.
Agreed.
That's a great answer, Leon. And thank you so much for being on The Only Constant. It was a real pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.
You've listened to The Only Constant, a podcast sponsored by Basico.